Jamal Murray suffered a torn ACL in his left knee. He will miss the rest of this season because of the timing of it. We're in middle of April right now. The NBA is hoping to get back to a normal schedule next year. A 12-month recovery time would put him out for most of, if not all, of next season, and that's just it's a fucking shame. There's no other way to put it. He is only 24. ACL injuries are not what they used to be. Guys can come back, they can perform at a high level, but just looking at the type of season he had after kind of a rough like 10 or 15 so games start to the season, he's just been absolutely fantastic for them, and he is so integral to what the Nuggets do. And the bigger picture here this season and next beyond, it's hazy now due to this injury. The first and foremost, the chief concern is just that hopefully he gets better. Jamal Murray already posted on Instagram, tweeted 3 emojis. That's what we do now, and it seems like he's in at least good spirits. But this is just he's a tough guy too, and I think everyone knew that when they saw him sort of writhing on the floor in pain against the Warriors. They knew it was bad. You were hoping it wasn't the worst case scenario, and a torn ACL is no longer the worst case scenario, but it's still pretty bad. Just having the stories about this guy, if you look at there was the ESPN piece from Jackie McMullen, I think 2 years ago at this point, it was a while ago, just about the training he went through with his dad. You should check that out. The anecdotes that get called from that they should be the stuff of legend, but it seems that they're actually true. And so it sucks on a human level to see players go through this. You don't know if it could have been prevented. I saw people saying that Mike Malone shouldn't have had him in the game at that point because the Warriors were already in front by enough, and like that really doesn't seem like a thing. It shouldn't have been a thing. It's not even really worth discussing. It feels like there have been more injuries this season. I don't think that's been statistically proven, and that's something that Katie and I actually talk about later in the podcast. I think Jeff Stotts from in Street Clothes says that they're not technically up, so we don't need to attribute it to this schedule. Although I doubt that something like that could have helped. And we've seen Mark Cuban and Luka Doncic now come out and against the play-in tournament amid this truncated schedule. The quickly on that, the play-in tournament is, whether you like it, it is fine. If you dislike it and have an argument against it, whatever. That's like not the argument to make. It's this season in general. If you have a problem with those extra 2 or 3 games of the play-in tournament, it's because that you're truncating these 72 games into such a small period of time, and that's taking the prevailing wear and tear on these players' bodies. But on the Jamal Murray front, I hope he gets back to where he was, knowing just the type of worker that he is. I fully believe that he'll come back and play at an all-star caliber level. What this means for the Nuggets immediately is incredibly difficult. They still have Nikola Jokic, can power the offense pretty much on his own, but they lose just so many elements in Jamal Murray's game that they can't come close to replacing in one player. There's maybe the biggest thing that they're just not going to replace is his synergy with Nikola Jokic. They're in year 5 together of their partnership, which at this point is more like a kinship. They are, and I wrote about this, they're hardwired to act in concert at this point. They torch defenses with their handoffs. The best defenses are going to suffer a death by 1,000 back cuts. And while Jokic knows where everyone on the floor is at all times, he sees more acutely aware of Murray's whereabouts than most. And it's not just knowing where Murray might be at a moment. He intuits where he's going. And Murray, in turn, has a unique grasp of where Jokic wants him to be. There's like this telepathic knowledge where Jokic can sense that Murray's in the corner when he's in traffic and just knows to throw it there. You can see some of this unfolding in real time where there's like almost a discourse. Maybe it's silent. There are hand gestures when they're communicating on offense. On other occasions, there's no pointing, no nodding, no calls to the ball, no visceral form of communication. Murray just does it. It being whatever the right decision might be, whether that's cutting, relocating away from the ball, coming to the ball, etc. It's really something that's amazing to watch. Watching those two is basketball at its most fun. And this just says nothing of his skill set detached from Jokic. You could point to the solo minutes for Denver this season with either one of their stars on the floor, and they have not been great. I think there's a lot of early season noise in that. Some of the bench heavy units definitely blow that up a little bit. It might also just be more of a harbinger of how much Denver prefers them together. But just looking at what Murray can do, he is by far Denver's best off the dribble scorer, or that's the person that they're going to trust the most to do that. He is taking 9.5 pull up shot attempts per game this season. The next closest player on the team is Aaron Gordon right now at 3.5. And then if you're looking for a mainstay, Will Barton at 3.1. Jamal Murray's hitting 39.1% of his off the dribble threes this year, by the way. There are only 4 players who are taking as many of these threes per game. That's 4, and hitting at least 39% of those off the dribble threes. You have Jamal Murray, you have D'Angelo Russell in a limited sample, still he played 25 games, Stephen Curry, and Mike Conley. That's pretty good company to be in. The other thing that I think you're going to notice is that so much of the offense can run through Jokic, and he's great at finding people, and if you can play off him, that's definitely a luxury. That element will sort of remain, but I would argue, and I actually did argue this in an article for Bleacher Report, that looking at how the Nets have been so banged up, and even LeBron and Anthony Davis missing so much time simultaneously, but also separately, the Murray-Jokic partnership was probably the best 1-2 punch in the league this season. You see it in crunch time. They're both pretty efficient there. And Murray is by usage rate, the second most relied upon player in the clutch. And while Jokic has shown that he's going to get you a from-scratch bucket, and that's why he's so unique as a big in those situations, is you don't need to necessarily just defer to Murray. They do lose that element of their offense in crunch time. And look, Murray's slashing, his shooting slashes are just absurd in the clutch this season. 51, 57, and 100. He's 15 of 15 at the foul line. So, and Jokic has been great too. He's hitting a monster percentage of his twos, not so much of his threes. 18 of 21 at the foul line, 85.7%. Has 17 assists in crunch time as well over the course of 111 minutes in the clutch. You can go to Michael Porter Jr. there, but here's the other thing. I've talked about how Michael Porter Jr.'s concession at this point is his role, where he probably definitely wants more control over the offense and can take it and wants more of those from scratch looks. It's just not something that he's necessarily, I don't even need to use the hedge qualifier. There's just not something that he's done. Jamal Murray, among all Nuggets rotation players, let's call them. Just, I'm not going to throw Shaq Harrison into this just because so much of his data is non-Nuggets data, but 58.2% of his made baskets are going unassisted. That's, for a go-to scorer, that's relatively low, and that speaks to how the Nuggets play. It's also the highest on the team by a mile. Monte Morris is in second place. 47.9% of his made baskets go unassisted. Jokic is third at 42.7%, and then this gets me to Michael Porter Jr. to this point. Again, this is a function of how the Nuggets want to use him, and it's probably been an adjustment on his part, but 80% of his baskets are coming on assists. And so if you're going to turn to him to be that from-scratch scorer, you can envision it. Someone who's 6'10", can handle the ball and shoot over the top of anybody, and has just been lethal this season on offense. You can envision it happening, but if you're going to saddle him with more volume, you have to get ready for growing pains, and that's tough to navigate when you're trying to win a championship. You do have Monte Morris to replace some of the playmaking. I don't think MPJ is going to give you much, if any of that. You also have Facundo Campazzo to do that. Neither of those two are just, Monte Morris is going to be, he's a better defender than Murray, probably. Murray is still improved on that end. Let's go like 2 seasons. The past 2 seasons, he's been all right on defense, and I think in the bubble is probably the best defense I've ever seen him play. Just super physical. And you're still losing that. I would think by the time maybe you listen to this, the Nuggets were already interested in Austin Rivers. They should just go out and sign him. I think he gives you some of the defensive positionality where he can guard 1 through 3 as opposed to just being able to do 1s and 2s like Murray. I wouldn't call him a better defender than Murray, but just someone else who can handle the ball, has shown that he can hit pull-up 3s in the past, though his numbers sort of fell off a cliff after a fairly good streak with the Knicks at the beginning of the season. He ultimately fell out of the rotation while he was struggling. That just seems like a no-brainer fit at this point. Aaron Gordon has improved as a passer a great deal, and you can look at the past 2 seasons. Last year, all of which he spent with Orlando, and then most of this season so far in Orlando. I think the thing there, and this would hold true for probably anybody, is just Murray's threat off the dribble. It will change the way that teams are going to guard you if there is someone else trying to facilitate the offense. And even Monte Morris and Facundo Campazzo are going to be able to do it in a more traditional way. That's not necessarily Aaron Gordon's game, and he's shot overall better than normal from 3-point range this year, but he's still not that wing type, guard type scorer where you necessarily get too scared of him going downhill. And so he's more of a, I think when you look back at his Orlando film, and a lot of the stuff, he threw some standstill passes, he threw some assists coming out of the pick and roll, but he did a lot of stuff just outside of the post. And yeah, you can, you're set up to do that because you run stuff with Jokic, and if you want to stagger their minutes more, but you're losing that north-south playmaking element that it's not going to be replaced in full for Monte Morris or Facundo Campazzo or Austin Rivers. That's not necessarily Jokic's game, and how much more can you ask this guy to do? I've received a lot of shit from Nuggets Twitter on this, that I'm not convinced that he is just the far away MVP. He's definitely in my top 2 right now. And so there's a chance he might be one without Murray if the Nuggets continue to excel. Yeah, that's going to bolster his case too. And I'm not trying to look at Murray's injury through that lens. Jokic is a deserving MVP either way. It's just how much more you're going to ask him to do without Murray. And so, now you're losing that pick and roll ability, and Murray was in the 78th percentile of pick and roll scoring efficiency this year, and isn't always the most accurate shooter, but you've looked at this guy hit such difficult shots in crunch time late in the shot clock. You're losing that bailout option. That's a really big deal. And Jokic has great chemistry with Will Barton, with Michael Porter Jr. It's just different with Jamal Murray, and losing that connection for your team, it's something that's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to overcome. What I think this means for Denver when you're looking at the title race, I would still put them in the top 5 of the Western Conference, to be honest. Maybe you can make a case for Dallas or Portland over them. I'll listen to it. I probably won't agree with it. Portland would come closest to me, but you probably have to slingshot them down to 5th place in the conversation, where you have Utah, the Clippers, the Lakers, and the Phoenix Suns in that discussion. The Nuggets are probably 5th. I wouldn't say all hope is lost, but the path to get out of the West just got a lot more difficult. And I also hate to look at it moving into next season, but if he's not going to play, they're still really talented, and maybe they're willing to spend, the mini mid-level exception, and you can pick up a nice ball handler or playmaker that helps spell his absence. It just sucks because you have Michael Porter Jr., who is, I'll just make this clear with the usual disclaimer. I'm not worried about the team affording to keep this core together, but the reality is that they were going to make a decision based off this playoff run and the next one, probably, because you have Michael Porter Jr., who's extension eligible this summer, and then both he and Aaron Gordon are slated, for free agency. Michael Porter Jr. will be a restricted free agent, but in 2022. Will Barton, if he picks up his player option, he's also scheduled for free agent in 2022. I think he has a $14.9 million player option this season. I feel like he should probably decline that, by the way. It just feels like he could probably get similar annual money over a longer term. So that's just something else that then they have to figure out. If he ups their timeline in that sense, I don't think they can afford to lose him, because he's someone who's going to give you that secondary playmaking too. I would argue Michael Porter Jr., Monte Morris, and Will Barton are probably the 3 most important Nuggets who are impacted by Jamal Murray's absence. Maybe you put Facundo Campazzo in there. Maybe you just assume that Jokic needs to be put up there a little bit. Maybe you really think that they're going to start milking Aaron Gordon's improved ball skills. I don't know, but that's just without having seen Denver play a game without Jamal Murray, that would just be my read on the situation. We'll do a deeper dive into this moving forward. To end this, though, you look ahead to next season, and now there's a chance that you lose that second playoff run to evaluate this core. And that just becomes really problematic, because it might be that, you want to keep Gordon. Michael Porter Jr. is, if he keeps playing like this, or if he plays even better in Murray's absence, that's going to be a quick negotiation, whether it's in restricted free agency or extension talks. That'll be a max money player. And so just what do? You have Paul Millsap hitting free agency this summer, but just looking at the 4-player core of Gordon, Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Jokic, I think let's throw Will Barton into there. That 5-player core was, hey, we probably have the next 2 postseasons, we know, with at least 4 of these guys, depending on what happens with Barton's player option, which was $14.7 million, so I was off by $200K. Now you've lost that. These players are good, but how well do they fit? You don't have that sample size now. And what happens next year? If maybe Murray comes back just before the playoffs, how much can you base on what happens there? Are the Nuggets less likely to extend Michael Porter Jr. now, or more likely because they want to build up that goodwill? They're just tough long-term decisions they have to make, and you can argue that 2 of their next title pushes are compromised by this. I'm not ready to write them off. This team is still Nikola Jokic only just turned 26, by the way, too. As people have noted, it's Aaron Gordon feels like he's been around forever. He is still only 25, and Michael Porter Jr. is what is he's got to be 21. I'm actually gonna double check that because I don't want to misspeak on Porter Jr.'s age. Weird that I don't know that off the top of my head. So like this core is still really young, and they have they can wait this out. He's 22, Michael Porter Jr. So he'll turn 23 in June. Like you have just so many of these guys on the right side of 27. They'll be fine long term if they want to keep everybody around. But this was a team that I think you could have legitimately said they were either the favorite to come out of the West, or if you're like me, that has kind of been, unless you can tell me LeBron and AD won't be healthy, because we can use the disclaimer of, a full strength Lakers are going to steamroll everybody, as my co-host likes to poke fun at me when I say that. So unless you're going to tell me that LeBron and AD won't be on the court for the Lakers, I'm just going to assume that they have the best chance to come out. I need to see it to believe it at this point, I think. And after that, it was wide open to begin with. I have the Suns there. It was by the narrowest of margins with the Nuggets. They could have been right there with Murray, if not there. And they certainly move out of that place right now. And this team was close. They made that all-in play for Aaron Gordon, and it's maybe a semi-all-in play. They gave up real assets to get him in R.J. Hampton and the pick. They did, they compromised the guard defense a little bit by giving up Gary Harris, even though he's been in a rut on offense for what feels like eternity. So this is tough, and it sucks. And I feel most for Jamal Murray. I assume that he will be fine. I expect him to be fine long term. It's going to be, I don't want to say intriguing or interesting, because I think in the back of my head, at least, that you're just going to know, like, we're missing out on this really special player amplifying a core that just made so much fucking sense at this point, where this Western Conference playoff race, the slog of this season, the moral dilemma behind it of so many games coming at you so fast amid what is still a pandemic, and seeing could there be a rise in soft tissue injuries. Again, we're going to get to that very shortly. It's just knowing that this is what happened to this core, where you're never going to see, or not never, but you're not going to see the peak of the Nuggets, at least this season. And again, probably not next season. It just sucks. And so here's to Jamal Murray making a full recovery. I think the Western Conference playoffs will still be super interesting. The Nuggets will be in the thick of it. We'll see what kind of unfolds from here.